Hello foodie friends, a storm has blown through so you might hear thunder periodically, and it seemed like the perfect time to come in and make something. Now this video is going to be a very special treat, and you may wonder why there's no cookbook sitting here but just this seemingly random piece of paper. That's because this particular cookbook is so rare that there's only a few copies, and of course I wasn't able to get one. But lucky for us, the University of Michigan has actually copied the original and put it on their website. So I will link that below so you can look at it too. It's completely free. You can have access to it anytime and cook whatever you want. And that very special cookbook found by the University of Michigan happens to be the Domestic Cookbook by Malinda Russell. And why that's so special is because last week, I sort of alluded to the fact that this was actually the very first cookbook ever produced by an African American on American soil that we know of so far. There could be an earlier one that pops up at any time, we just don't know. But for now, this is the very first one. Now, that means last week, what we thought was the very first cookbook published by an African American woman by Abby Fisher turns out to not be the case. But you could say that there is a small difference. Abby Fisher was actually born a slave and freed later. Fortunately for Malinda Russell, she was born a free woman of a lady who had been freed by her owner prior to Malinda's birth. So you could say that Abby Fisher was the very first former slave who published a cookbook, and Malinda Russell was the first free woman to publish a cookbook. So we're gonna go ahead and do a little bit of a field trip because this is a very special connection that we have to Malinda Russell, because not only was she born in Washington County, which is one county up from us, but she was raised right here in Greene County. So we're basically in her old stomping grounds. So first, before we get into the recipe, we're gonna take a short little field trip to show you where she would have been, kind of what things that she would have seen in the area that she would had lived and owned her pastry shop. And then we're gonna go downtown and show you some of the buildings that she definitely would have seen and walked past. So stay tuned for that, and then we'll get cooking.
Now first I wanted to give you somewhat of an idea of what Greeneville would have looked like around the time Malinda Russell would have seen it. So the first black and white picture is undated, but the next two sepia-toned pictures are dated 1875. Now that's about 10 years after she left, but it still gives you a rough idea of what she would have seen. And my best guess is that we're looking in the third picture at the St. James Episcopal Church with Main Street in the background. Now here we are in the back of Andrew Johnson's homestead. Mrs. Russell would have passed this house many times, as it was built in 1830. She would also have known that this was Andrew Johnson's actual house where he lived because he bought it in 1851. Even though she was born in Washington County about 1812, she was raised right here in Greene County, and so she would have come to town many times. Mrs. Russell also would have known about Andrew Johnson's tailor shop and maybe had seen him personally. He took over the presidency after Lincoln was assassinated, but unfortunately had strong opposition to federally guaranteeing rights for Black Americans. And unfortunately for Greeneville, by many historians he's considered one of the worst presidents in our entire history. As this would have been considered the president's private property and not a national park as it is now, she more than likely would not have been allowed to walk around in the backyard. However, she could have very likely walked right past the front. And I heard a story that these very cobblestones in the front of the house are original to the time period, and so may have been walked on by Malinda Russell, but I could not substantiate that on any website, including the Park Service, so I don't know if I would hold that as an absolute fact. And now you see why we're actually filming towards the evening. That's so I can go in the road and actually get good shots without the fear of lots of traffic. These two homes you see now would have also been very familiar to Malinda Russell. The first brick being the Clausen McDowell Brown home that was built in 1810, but the white house next to it is actually a bit more unusual. It was built by Valentine Sevier in 1795 as a two-story log home, which was later covered with the white clapboard you see here. It has the distinction of being the oldest building in Greeneville. Mrs. Russell would have also walked past this jailhouse. The original one-story building was built in 1804 and stood in the middle of what's now Depot Street. They moved it to this location in 1838, and then the red brick second story was added in 1882 after she had long vacated Greene County. Now, I decided against going inside as it was pitch black inside and getting very dark outside, and didn't feel comfortable going in there without a flashlight. Also, it's known locally to be quite a bit haunted. Now, Malinda Russell would not have seen this courthouse as it was built in 1916, and you'll have to ignore the tent because of infection rates going up about a certain something going on right now. People are required to wait outside in an effort to slow that down. But our courthouse does have the rare distinction of having monuments to both the Confederate side and the Union side. The first monument is to Confederate John Morgan, who was actually killed right here in downtown Greeneville. And the other monument is actually to all the Union soldiers that Tennessee supplied to the Union side. Now, Mrs. Russell would have lived in East Tennessee during a time of extreme unrest and probably intense fear. She lived in an area that was staunchly pro-Union, but that didn't necessarily mean that that's the way Tennessee would go. West Tennessee was decidedly Confederate, and so the vote fell to Middle Tennessee, who voted to secede. East Tennessee was dragged right along with them in order to not be surrounded by the Confederacy. This didn't stop pro-Unionists from developing guerrilla war tactics as they burned bridges and destroyed rail lines in an effort to stop the Confederacy. East Tennessee, including Greeneville, changed hands many times between Confederates and Unionists, and because of their pro-Union stance, the town of Greeneville was often punished with martial law, forced conscriptions, and other efforts to try to keep the Unionists down. These measures still didn't stop Tennessee from sending more troops to the Union side than all other Confederate states combined. We were the last to secede and the first to rejoin, after making it illegal to own human property in 1865. Mrs. Russell would have been right in the middle of this back and forth tug of war and wouldn't escape the violence herself, but we'll talk more on that later. She would have definitely known about the Greeneville-Cumberland Presbyterian Church, built in the 1860s, that was shelled in the Civil War in 1864. It also served as a hospital and a stable during that time. She also would have been familiar with this church, the St. James Episcopal Church, that was built in 1850 and may be the one that's pictured in the sepia photo from before. It's also right around here that General John Morgan got shot as he got ratted out by the townsfolk. Now, this imposing house would have definitely been known to Malinda Russell, as this was the site that General Morgan spent his last night and then got shot. This house was built by William Dixon in 1821 for his only child, Catherine. She married a handsome doctor and gave lavish parties while enjoying their commanding view of the town. The house changed hands many times between the Unions and Confederates, sometimes serving as a headquarters for both. It's here that General Morgan stayed his last night, and rumor goes Mrs. Lucy Williams, Catherine's daughter-in-law, reported him and pointed him out to Union troops, who then ambushed him and killed him right in the garden. The room where General Morgan slept still contains the original furniture. This house is a perfect example of just how divided sympathies were in East Tennessee, as Catherine was decidedly a Southern sympathizer. However, her son and daughter-in-law were both pro-Union. By 1913, this house was sold to the Greeneville Sanitarium and Hospital and served as a hospital until 1978. It's an odd harkening back to its Civil War days, as it was used as a hospital for soldiers at that time too. Because of its long history of war, violent deaths, births, and surgeries, it's known in the town as being terribly haunted. So let's sit on the front porch for a spell, watching over our town, even as the ghosts of the past may do yet. Now, for our second field trip, we decided to go ahead and bring our very excited dog along for the ride. Now, of course, we don't know the exact location of Malinda Russell's house or her pastry shop, but I can at least show you the mountains that she would have seen and the area that she would have lived. Around 1831, she actually ended up settling in Virginia. While there, she met her husband and had one child. It's in Virginia where she began her career as a cook. Unfortunately, after only 4 years, her husband died. After that, she moved back to Greene County, which was also her mother's birthplace, and opened up a boarding house in Chucky Mountain in the Cold Springs area. After 3 years, she saved up enough money to start her own pastry shop around 1858. What you're seeing now is the Chucky Mountains, and while the land and buildings look different after 100 years, the mountains have stayed the same. Now, as for this little creek and church, I was unable to find an exact date of when it was built. However, the oldest tombstone I could find in the back has a tombstone dated to 1882. Some of them look to be much older, but you can't make it out. So there may have been a church and a graveyard at this area while she was here, but she most certainly would have known this little creek. She says in her book, quote, "By hard labor and economy, I saved a considerable sum of money for the support of myself and son, which was taken from me on the 16th of January, 1864, by a guerrilla party who threatened my life if I revealed who they were." She continues that under those circumstances, we were obliged to leave home, following a flag of truce out of the southern borders, being attacked several times by the enemy. She decided to settle in Paw Paw, Michigan, considering Michigan was the Garden of the North. As for her life in Michigan, I imagine she didn't like it as much as she thought, and according to her, became quite homesick for Greene County. She published her cookbook in 1866 in Paw Paw, Michigan, saying, "This is one reason why I published my cookbook, hoping to receive enough from the sale of it to enable me to return home." Due to a fire that destroyed Paw Paw, Michigan, shortly after she published her cookbook, we now have no records of what happened to her after that time. There's only one known copy of her cookbook known to exist. And without it, we would have never known anything about Malinda Russell or that she even existed. But because of it, she's gone down in history as the first African American to publish a cookbook on American soil. Now that we have a better understanding of who Malinda Russell was and where she lived, let's go ahead and make one of her cakes. Now, just like other old-timey recipe books, she did not include detailed instructions on how to make the cake, assuming that you would already have this knowledge. So I looked up a similar cake recipe and kind of just went with what I know from having baked other cakes in the past. So let's start by creaming our butter and sugar together. Now, I thought I'd do this the old-fashioned way since Malinda didn't have any kind of electrical equipment and decided to use a bowl and a wooden spoon to do it myself. Now, did I get really tired and regret this decision? Yeah, actually I did. But I decided to persevere in the form of asking my husband to kind of finish the process for me. I now added the eggs 2 at a time and tried to cream them together in between each one. Now, did my arms get so tired that I finally just went ahead and got my hand mixer out? Yeah, I did that. But I would like to think that if Malinda Russell had had access to these tools, she would have definitely been using them and been glad for it. I have a lot of respect for a woman who can own her own pastry shop before electricity. After all the eggs were blended in, I went ahead and added the milk, the rind of the lemon, and then the juice of both halves of the lemon. Now in a separate bowl, I mixed together my flour and the cream of tartar. I added 2 cups of flour to the wet mixture and mixed thoroughly each time until all the flour was gone. Now you could probably bake this into loaf pans like a pound cake because that's about what it's like. However, I decided to do a more traditional cake with the actual round cake pans, but I thoroughly oiled and floured each one before putting in the batter. Now you're going to bake this at a 350-degree oven until a knife or toothpick comes out clean when inserted in the middle. Now you can see the batter is quite thick. So this is going to be kind of what I would think of as a heavy pound cake. Which is why I decided to make something light to put on the cake. And I thought that the berries and the wojape sauce that we made from the Sioux Chef a few weeks ago would complement the lemon perfectly. And you don't have to do this if you don't want, but in between the layers, I just so happened to have some lemon curd and decided to put a thin layer in between. Next, I poured the wojape sauce on top and then decorated it with a few sprigs of fresh mint I had in the garden. This made for a beautiful cake we could not wait to try.
So this took a lot of guesswork on my part because, like with most historical recipes, they don't give you like the temperature for your stove, how long to cook it, how to mix it, what to mix first, how to put things together. It's just the ingredients, and that's it.
They might have just had a wood stove to cook with.
It might have been.
Didn't have a whole lot of room for temperature.
No, I mean, this is just, when you're trying to guess, like take a historical recipe to a modern kitchen, it's actually kind of difficult. So we'll see. I tried my best.
Well,
that's all
good.
I can say. Okay. It's a good clue that we immediately went for a second bite. If you know.
Yeah, I wanted to get more fruit on the second one.
I mean, I don't think I did too bad.
No, that's good.
For like a historical recipe that you're just kind of like, how does this go together?
Yeah.
I actually think this is really good.
Yeah. The flavor is like, I mean, the texture's good if you know what you're expecting.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, expect a heavier cake.
Yeah.
But the flavor is amazing.
The lemon.
Oh, yeah.
Wow,
It,
the
like,
lemon comes through.
comes through really well. And it's complemented really well with the berry, like...
Yeah, and that's the thing. She did not give any kind of hint or tip or anything, which is typical for the time period. She did not give anything about how to like dress the cake.
Oh, okay.
You know, like what kind of frosting or just like a sugar dusting or something like, which I'm assuming they probably would have done some kind of simple sugar dusting. But I just so happen to have some lemon curd. So I thought to put that in between the layers. And then, I mean, with lemon and a pound cake, I mean, the wojape sauce from our previous video from the Sioux Chef, and I will link that video in the description below if you want to check that out. That goes perfect with
this. It's a
this.
really good compliment. I thought it was part of the recipe.
No, it wasn't. I was just like, you know, lemon and berry sauce always goes really good together, and I couldn't think of anything better than the wojape sauce.
Yeah.
So you can see, like, I'm trying to incorporate, you know, all the different cookbooks that we've been getting so far, and kind of showing you that a lot of these, like, what you would kind of think of as niche cookbooks, maybe like, maybe I don't have so much of a call for that. No, there's actually quite a bit of versatility to them. So, you know, a couple weeks ago, we had this wojape sauce on an indigenous taco, bison meat, and now we're having it on a lemon pound cake. And it's awesome in both situations. And as for the cake, I would make this again.
Oh, yeah. It's very good.
Yeah, definitely make this again. And I expected this to be good, considering Malinda Russell owned her own pastry shop here in Greene County. So she probably made hundreds of these, and man, do I kind of feel sorry for her without modern equipment, because mixing cakes all day long. I mean, if she could have got an electric mixer, she probably would have just thought she was in heaven.
We don't know how many kids she had.
She had oh gosh, you know what? I need to look that up and see. I know she had one son at least.
He could have done a lot of mixing.
Yeah, that's true. She could have just been like, "Hey, get in here and mix this cake because, you know, I'm tired." But I mean, I know I got tired. But I'm going to give this recipe a 5.
Yeah, it's very good.
Now, bear in mind, you know, you could make any kind of different kind of sauce for it, or just dust it with the sugar if you wanted to. Any kind of jam and marmalade would also
be very good.
would also be really good.
You could dress it with anything. I mean, even the actual icing.
It
might be a little too sweet.
I thought about that. I was thinking a buttercream, or, you know, some kind of
like a cream cheese.
But you have a heavy pound cake.
That's true.
Then you put a heavy frosting on it. I think the lightness of the berries.
That's true. And it complements it well without being too sweet.
Right. That's why I was kind of thinking maybe go more towards jam and marmalade and wojape sauce, you know, if you want to do something like that. But, and let me tell you, it's been really fun. Now, her cookbook is really interesting because, like I said, if this was done on a wood stove, you don't know because she didn't specify.
You can't really adjust the temperature by a lot.
No.
You kind of move stuff around.
I mean, I guessed.
Yeah.
You know, based on like other cakes and stuff that I made. But one thing that's really cool about it is you can tell the difference between like skilled people or I shouldn't say not skilled people because we have different skills today than they would have had back then. So we're all skilled. It's just in different areas. But you can tell when you read any historical cookbook that the author of those cookbooks expected anyone who picked it up to already have a very knowledgeable skill base.
Yeah, they didn't expect
in
somebody
the kitchen.
that didn't grow up cooking.
Exactly. They did not hold your hand.
No.
You knew already how to feed the fire, how to stoke your oven perfectly to bake the cake and everything. I mean, it was basically a science, you know, trying to regulate your own oven like that.
I mean, that's stuff that most people back then had to grow up learning.
Oh, yeah. It was just, it was nothing.
Yeah, it was typical knowledge. Like, you know, we think driving a car is pretty typical knowledge.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
What I mean?
it's just different
They
skills.
rode horses. It was typical
Yeah.
knowledge. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like I would
Now-
be scared to death to drive a rat wagon. Like I don't want to do that, but
Yeah.
I don't want an animal connected to what I'm.
But it is
in.
interesting to see how cooking was so much more of a typical thing.
Oh, definitely.
That like you can tell by the
Yes.
cookbook that these people, this was something that they did on a daily basis,
Yep.
and everybody took a little bit of a part in it.
Yeah.
And then people understood it way
Yes.
better than we do now. We're so used to just
definitely.
going to a store and getting something.
That's the fun part between looking at these historical cookbooks and then a more modern cookbook, because you literally have modern step 1 through whatever, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like exactly each step underneath.
Yeah.
And it basically, like any beginning cook can theoretically pick up any modern cookbook
Yeah, you have
and then
very
make
specific,
a meal. Yeah.
ingredients and
Not with
amounts and all
historical
that.
ones.
No.
Like I really highly recommend you going to. I'll put a link to that website below also, where you can go and look at her cookbook for free. But I would highly recommend you doing it because it's really interesting, and she puts her story in the cookbook. So you can read, we got a lot of information just based on what she said in her own cookbook, which was really cool. If she hadn't have done that, we would not have known this woman.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that was the cool thing about it. Like, she preserved her own memory.
Yeah.
And that was something neat. But I would encourage you to go look at it, but I'll put the same caveat that I did with the last week's recipes. If you're not experienced in the kitchen and you're just beginning, I would not start with it.
No.
Because,
do a few pound cakes, kind of get a feel for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Before you jump into something like this.
Yeah, because I'm an experienced cook, and I've been cooking, for our entire 13-year marriage. So I've got 13 years in the kitchen, and I still had to make a few guesses.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the fun part for me for a historical cookbook. You're just kind of trying to figure out, what direction you think the author might have gone based on just common sense and things that you've picked up in the kitchen. And then you kind of hope it just turns out.
Yeah.
So I was worried, I'm not going to lie. Because I was just like, is this... but I think it turned out good.
It turned out really good.
And I love the wojape sauce on it. I mean, that to me makes it, because you can eat a plain pound cake.
Yeah.
But I like to spice it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of like a strawberry shortcake. I like some berries on it.
Yeah.
And so this is just kind of the perfect complement for it.
It's very
So
good.
I would definitely give her cookbook a 5, just because. Now, in her cookbook, she's really heavy, obviously, on the cakes and pies and cookies side, because that was her
She's a
business.
pastry chef, yeah.
And she actually, interestingly enough, made the cookbook in order to make enough money to be able to come back to Tennessee from Michigan. So that was kind of interesting. Now, unfortunately, after, that, we don't know.
Right.
We don't know what happened after she left Michigan, if she ever did.
Right.
So, and that's kind of the sad thing, too, about, certain groups in our country, certain minorities and certain, there's a hard time trying to find information about certain people, certain historical
Yeah,
people.
not just like ethnic minorities, but even like lower class.
Yeah, you did.
Financial.
Yeah,
is it?
there's certain groups in America that just didn't have their history recorded or written down. And then, of course, when you rely on papers for everything
Right.
at a certain time period, one fire can wipe out the whole town's records.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of that going on too, but I also think, I've done a lot of family, research into my own, genealogy and stuff like that. I think most of us have. And I've been able to find a wealth of information.
Yeah.
But I feel sorry for, groups of people who are not able to do that. And it's kind of sad for me, because I really wanted to know what happened to Malinda Russell. if there's anyone with some family lore, that's been passed down, let us know, because I would love to know. Now, on our end, we just thought of, let's do a tombstone search.
Yeah. We could do that.
If she didn't remarry, or if she didn't, she kept the name Russell, we may be able to find that in Greene County.
Yeah.
And if we do, we'll definitely let you know.
Put a note in the
description. We'll just do maybe a little blurb of a video and just say, we found it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would love to know if she came back.
Yeah.
Because in her book, she really expressed the desire to want to come back to Tennessee. She wanted to get her property back. She wanted to be, and I just think that's kind of cool. Like, did she get to Michigan and then she was just like, this isn't home.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a good state, but it's
not where you grew up.
And it's kind of how ironically, it's kind of how, I was born and raised in Michigan, and I have a lot of family down here. We would take vacations down here when I was a child, and we never wanted to go back to Michigan. I mean, it wasn't home.
Yeah.
Even though I was born and raised there, the mountains to me
felt more home.
Felt like home. It was like where my people had come from, where, my ancestors had walked for hundreds of years, in these mountains. And so, when we were finally able to move down here, it was like coming home. So I wonder if she had that same
maybe stronger
feeling.
She grew up here.
Yeah, she did. She grew up here, so it probably was a stronger tie even. Yeah. And maybe, her people grew up here. We don't really know. Like what, how many how many generations of her family did she have here? Yeah. And did she feel that pull to come home, and was she able to?
Yeah.
I hate that we don't know. Yeah. But maybe we'll go down a rabbit hole and we'll try to figure that out. Yeah. Unfortunately, because our area is being hit particularly hard right now with a certain
virus.
Yeah, certain virus that we don't want to,
mention by
name. I know. It's like triggering.
He shall not be named.
Yeah, seriously. Well, it's anxiety triggering for some people, including myself. It's hard to talk about, but we're experiencing quite a bit of surge. So most of our city or town offices are closed. So I can't do a genealogy search right now. I can't go to our genealogy library and maybe have them search historical records for Malinda Russell. I can't go to the library. So maybe that's something that if we ever finally come out on the other side of this, maybe when these offices are able to safely reopen, that's something that we'll contact them and just see.
Yeah.
And see if she came home.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's awesome. So, we're going to eat this really good cake and really hope that you try it. I think you'll really like it, and I think you'll enjoy taking a little adventure in the kitchen and doing some guesswork and maybe stretching your skills, because I certainly did with this one. And thank you so much for watching this. Really hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the history associated with it. And so stay tuned for next week, because this marks the end of our Americana series. And next month, in honor of vacations that we really can't take right now, we're going to take a nostalgic look at some road trip souvenir cookbooks. From the 50s and 60s. Were they worth buying? And I guarantee you, if your grandparents or your parents were like great American road trippers, I guarantee you've got some of these cookbooks somewhere in your collection, and they will recognize these. So we're gonna put them to the test. They're stereotyped. They're corny. They look awful.
Oh no.
But we're gonna try it, and we're gonna see were these things actually worth the money that
the 5 cents that our
grandparents put into this. So it should be really fun. It's gonna be a different look at the cornballness of American road trips.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Sounds like fun.
yeah, so thanks for watching this week. I hope you stay tuned because you're going to enjoy that next series. We'll see you then. Bye.
If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and hit the subscribe button for future videos. In the meantime, here are 2 videos you may enjoy. Thanks for watching.